Hi there, I'm Dilwyn Roberts, former TV production manager, media lecturer and one-third of the Emma and Elwyn trio which graced our night spots during the 1970s and 80s.
And I'm Hugh Roberts, local musician, songwriter, author, playwright, and have been following and been involved with the music scene in Colwyn Bay and the surrounding area for decades.
And we're here to take you on a whistle-stop journey of recollections and memories of the music and entertainment enjoyed in Colwyn Bay over the years.
Music in the Bay, a podcast from Bayside Radio.
In the first episode, we enjoyed memories of the pier from local entertainer Stuart Loughland. And we touched on the role of the agent and ticket agency for bringing us an exciting range of bands over the years. Here's Richard Coleman talking about bringing his band, Challice, to the pier, and how the local agency worked hard to keep the pier and other local music venues alive with the sound of music and entertainment.
I'm Richard Coleman. I'm a resident of Colwyn Bay, born in Colwyn Bay in 1954, and then in the sixth form at the Colwyn Bay High School became a member of the band Challice. We toured the North Wales coast and we played on the pier quite a few times. It was totally different than anything else. The first thing, obviously, was the fact that when you were on the pier, you could see the sea through the actual dance floor, which put off quite a few people and put off quite a few members of the band, always thinking that we might be collapsing down into the waves. Luckily, it never happened. The changing rooms on the pier were absolutely disgraceful. They stank of seaweed. They had old chairs and old pianos and a whole variety of things there. But the crowd of people that you played to on Colwyn Bay, they were absolutely fantastic. And when you got into the rock part of our agenda, which we tended to do in our second half of our playing, the whole pier would shake. Again, making them think that they were most probably going to end up in the waves. When we decided to get the band together, obviously the first thing that you need to do is to get a playlist, and we worked out that you would need about 20 numbers, so we would regularly rehearse, and then Brian, our rhythm guitarist, who was also our electrician buddy within the band, he actually knew Ray Herbert from past life and said, well, as he was running Rainbow Enterprises, would they be interested in taking us on as a band? Ray came to listen to us and said yes he would, and of course Ray worked with Bob Page, and the pair of them ran Rainbow Enterprises and really had tied up most of the entertainment groups in North Wales, and it was through Ray and Bob and Rainbow that we got practically all our bookings throughout the career that Challice ran in North Wales. We used to do, our first booking was actually at the Marconi Club in Carnarvon. Now, the Marconi Club is out in the wilds, and 6 months ago, our rhythm guitarist actually went to the Marconi Club, which is now a woodworking centre, took a picture of the old mat, which still has Marconi Club in it, sent it to me and said, where is this? And I said, that was our first ever booking. Our first ever booking with one microphone, which was mine, and a couple of borrowed amplifiers as well. And as I say, that was our first booking. We then moved on to play at the Miss Conway Festival. We played at Tivoli Gardens down in Stoke. We did a couple of universities, Alsager, college, obviously the pier. We did a lot of clubs in Rill where we supported Frank Carson on one occasion, Russ Abbott and the Black Abbott when he was the sort of main guy there. So we had a thoroughly good time. We played a lot of the Eagles numbers. We would start off with Best of My Love by the Eagles. We loved the Rolling Stones because the Rolling Stones were in a very strong era then. Honky Tonk Women, Satisfaction, we would play bands like that. Badfinger, Smokey, we played those. Mott the Hoople as well, and obviously we would also go back to the old favourites like the Beatles, Elvis, and build up the playlist really from a quiet section where in working men's clubs at that time, which were very well supported, people would sit down and have a beer, to the second half where we rocked it up a bit to the dance music for 45 minutes, and people would get up and dance and have a really good time. The pier, though, was iconic in so many people's memories, and playing on the pier, because it was such a big room really for the dance bands, and quite echoey when you were playing, getting the levels of sound was quite difficult when we were there. We saw Mud played and Elvis Costello played. We saw those, but it was quite difficult because they would be on particular dates when we were out ourselves, and so it was very difficult to get there. And it was also a time when, because we'd left the sixth form and we were at college and university, we weren't really based in the Bay. It was weekends, and we would come back to the Bay and we would do our particular performances, and then again we'd separate out for the following week. But I think in all we did about 4 or 5 bookings on the pier, and a lot of them were also based around Rainbow Enterprises, and they sometimes did the sort of talent ideas for agents. So agents would come along and watch a couple of bands, so you'd play 2 or 3 particular songs, and then agents would either look you up and use like that.
I'll introduce myself. I'm Hugh, a local boy, musician, author, playwright, theatre producer. But I got a lot of memories of the pier. I'm a little bit younger than you, but I was born in 64, so it's 10 years in it, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I came in through probably the later 70s era, remembering all the gigs, that we used to go to, people like Saxon and Slade and Magnum, and some of the, the Slade gig was amazing. And when you mentioned earlier that you thought that the pier was going to collapse, I mean, that we all thought the pier was going to collapse. The place was bouncing, it was brilliant. The tech dancers as well, they were really active. Just general skullduggery and good fun, really. We were I was being about 14, 15, 16, 17, maybe 18. And it was an iconic place. It was the place to go, and there'd be a bit of, argy-bargy occasionally out there. But it's a shame, it's a great loss in terms of venue. And, it's focused on bringing some really quite big names to Colwyn Bay, and in the punk era particularly, people like Susie and the Banshees would play. You've got a funny story, the Jam not selling any tickets, and they got huge next week or something like that. Elvis Costello you mentioned, splodginess of Bounds, and there's some sort of curious stories about that. And I think it was them who left a pig's head in the dressing room or something along those lines. It was a big kerfuffle anyway.
It was probably still there when we were playing it.
Yeah. No. But I went in to the pier before it closed down, and I remember it being really huge inside, and it was tiny. I mean, when I went in, I thought, how did we all get in there? I remember there were all these bars and huge stage, and it was nothing like that at all. It was really quite small. I don't know what the capacity was.
No. And I don't know what the bands would get paid when they played. I mean, we were getting paid £35 was our first payment between 5 of us. So it'd be £5 each, £5 for the taxman, £5 for equipment.
It's not moved on a lot since then, to be honest.
No, well,
the gigs we play around here, we don't get paid much at all, really.
Yeah.
The venues can't afford it.
Yeah.
It's different if you go maybe Liverpool way or something like that. But around here, you got to understand that these pubs aren't raking it in.
But working men's clubs have changed as well, haven't they? Because they used to have every Saturday night, they used to have social time, they used to have a band on. And I remember playing at Llan Roost on one occasion, where as we came onto stage, the last member of the audience was going out the back, leaving a totally empty hall, and the entertainment manager turned to us and said, he says, it's all right, they're going across the road to play bingo now, they'll be back for your second half. So we played a totally empty hall for our first half, but true enough, they did come back for the second half. But that was working men's clubs at that time. Well,
the Comrades Club in Conway, they're doing quite a lot of music now.
Oh, right.
I've played there a few times.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few venues now really getting enthused about pushing on.
Yeah,
they are, and there's the Anglers Club in Roads where I put on, I host the open mic night down there, which is really successful. It's really funny night. And quite a few really around the local. A couple in the Irish Barn, Llandudno. There's Cross Keys, the Parks putting music on there now. And there's a couple of acoustic nights knocking about. Mm-hmm. So it's still fairly active. And we used to rehearse. Do you know Selwyn's Dairy?
Yes.
Just up on the road all the solicitors are on. It's a little setback. It was a rehearsal studio, great little space, well equipped. So we used to rehearse there a lot with a couple of the bands I've been in. But it's very difficult finding anywhere to rehearse really.
Yeah, we were lucky that our drummer had a house up at Upper Colwyn Bay with a place underneath the garage, which was sort of like cellar. And so we were able to rehearse there.
Publicising yourself as well has always been a challenge. I mean, we've got Facebook now and social media, which is nice because it's free. Yeah. But in the past, it was prohibitively expensive, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very difficult. Yeah. When we hired the Roadshow Hotel, we would literally have to print our own posters and put them up around Colwyn Bay, taking hours, to get people in. But we managed to make a profit.
What was your instrument?
I was vocals.
Right, okay, got you.
And random tambourine, let me say.
The random tambourine.
That's what my wife said. You were random tambourine, own that. I said, yeah, okay, fair enough, I'll own that.
But it's the same, when you're young and you're starting in a band, and it's like it's rock and roll. And, rock and roll is always about getting a bunch of mates, getting some cheap instruments, and none of you could play them, and you're on guitar, you're on bass, you're on drums, and you learn it, and before you know it, you got yourself a band and you got yourself a name, and you hope to get the girls,
Yeah.
Richard Coleman was interviewed by my colleague Hugh Roberts. Now, the music scene of the 1970s was divided into two separate tribes, the mods and the rockers. Here's Frank, who remembers those dark days.
Well, there was a lot more going on then. There were lots of local small clubs around, and especially at Colwyn Bay Pier, which would bring in live bands. You'd have the Beat. I don't remember the original Beat. I remember them coming down, but there were so many. But they had this old boy who used to play the saxophone, and he got half cut at the bar, and then he'd just jump in with all the crowd and start dancing with everybody after they'd done their gig. They were absolutely fantastic. And then you'd have the Colwyn Bay Pier all-nighters. We'd have soul nights that would go on, I can't remember the exact time, so it might go on till about 12, till 8 o'clock in the morning. And there were small other clubs that were knocking around. You'd have the Pen and Bay Old Hall. Oh, yeah, there was plenty to do back then, a hell of a lot more than what there is now. There used to be it was just a bit before my time, about a couple of years before my time, around about the mid-70s, they'd have the Llandudno Parrots, and then you'd have the Llandudno Junction Mafia. Yeah, you couldn't go to Llandudno, believe it or not, and then you couldn't go to Colwyn Bay. Colwyn Bay would have another gang as well. I remember the first rallies coming down, especially the very first. I'm trying to think of it was early 80s. Can't remember it. It was either 81 or 82. And it was completely different dress code then. The scooters that would come down then were more into khaki greens and flight jackets and Dr. Martens, high boots. The mod scene was moving on then. So, and they were younger as well. I remember the lads were younger. Yeah, it was mainly, and I remember going in, I thought, wow, they were very rough looking, rough on the edges, whereas, so they were breaking away from this mod cool look, whereas in the 70s, lads on the scooters used to dress a lot more smarter on the scooters. Coming into the 80s, it wasn't so much of a dress thing, but they had some absolutely beautiful scooters, absolutely, the artwork on them was terrific. Coming into the 80s, the Vespa was a more reliable scooter than the Lambretta. So these lads were riding from all over the country. So with the Vespa being a lot more reliable, there were a lot more Vespas on the road than what there were Lambrettas. So the Vespas started to take over then from the Lambretta. There were certain places where you couldn't go on the scooter, but you seemed to be right along the coast was you were okay. But apart from, of course, the bank holiday, when you go down to Rill in the bank holiday, and they mayhem down there.
That was Frank with his memories of being a mod and the scooter rallies that were a big part of bank holidays in the Bay in the 80s. Starting around 1960, the mods embraced the offbeat Jamaican ska music of artists such as the Scatterlights, Owen Gray and Derek Morgan, before enjoying hits from many of the popular acts that developed in the 1970s and 80s. The Pier played host to some of these bands, and we'll hear tracks from a few familiar names, plus one that got away June 1980, The Beat, who graced the stage back in August 1981, and finally the one that got away, from the Jam. It was stated in the North Wales Weekly News that the Dixieland manager John Galt cancelled their 1978 gig, fearful that not enough tickets had been sold. He promptly put a very curt advertisement in the paper stating that the concert on June the 14th was now cancelled due to public indifference. And soon after, as we know, the Jam shot into the big time. Now, another fan of the music scene at that time was Lee. Here he is remembering when the Radio 1 Roadshow came to the Bay.
The Radio 1 Roadshow! Today, live from Areas Park, Colwyn Bay. Radio 1 on the road.
My name is Lee and I am from Colwyn Bay. It was always advertised on the radio, and obviously as a 14-year-old boy we were always listening to Radio 1, listening to the top 10, and it was highly advertised, and the summer road shows, and it was coming to Colwyn Bay, and all very excited to go and see it. I know my mum was quite excited to go and see it, and my little sister, and the three of us packed some stuff together. I remember it being a lovely day, and really enjoyed it.
She was more like a beauty queen from a movie scene.
Basically, we were sat near the front, and then the announcer came on, and he said, "We're looking for people to take part in bits and pieces, and put your hands up," basically. So, put my hand up, and I was lucky enough that the announcer looked at me and said, "You'll do."
Well, it's all very exciting. The Roadshow today from Colwyn Bay. Hello, Lee.
Hello.
You've got a deep voice for the size that you are. You're only little, aren't you?
Yeah.
How old are you?
14.
Has your voice always been like that?
No.
I mean, when you were a baby in your pram, and somebody used to come and say, "Nice baby," you used to go, "Ga, ga, ga, ga." Hey?
There was 4 people taking part in the competition. You had a snippet of a song that was popular at the time, and you had to name the song and the artist, and whoever got the most right won. It wasn't me, I came joint second.
Radio 1 Roadshow, bits and pieces.
Sig and Lee were both on the same score, which was so extremely low I do not wish to discuss it on the wireless.
The only thing that really reminds me about the event is when I listen to 80s music, and you have flashbacks to that time, and what a great time it was. Great time to be a 14-year-old, 15-year-old boy. Oh, I used to love the Jam and Madness, Northern Soul, Tamla Motown. Vaguely remember the scooter rallies coming to Colwyn Bay in the early 80s, and Colwyn Bay being absolutely full of Lambrettas and Vespers and Parker wearing mods, and really great time, really enjoyed it. Loved the music, loved the crowd, and still do.
A Colwyn Bay fan of the Radio 1 Roadshow by the name of Lee. Now, there's one venue in Colwyn Bay that's been active for nearly 140 years, and since then the theatre has become Colwyn Bay's centre of music and entertainment. This is the story of Theatr Colwyn. Work began on the theatre in 1885 by the recently established Public Hall Company. The first people to use the hall were the congregation of St Paul's Church, whose original building had burned down. Services were held at the hall until 1888. The venue was also used for a wide range of functions, including military events, political rallies, shadowgraph shows, illustrated lectures, and after 1901, plays direct from the West End. The public hall also became the headquarters of the world-famous Congo Institute, based nearby. The Reverend William Hughes, its founder, was also minister of the Welsh Baptist Church, which is a few doors away from Theatr Colwyn. In the first decade of the 20th century, the venue was taken over by the impresario and performer Harry Reynolds, already a famous face in Colwyn Bay with his minstrel troupe. By January 1909, he'd had the public hall converted into Colwyn Bay's first picture house, with the installation of electricity and a modern auditorium. On the 25th of January 1909, under the name of Harry Reynolds' Unrivaled Animated Pictures, he screened several short films which included A Fairy Godmother, A Bad Pinch of Snuff, and The Misdeeds of a Sack of Coal. Tickets to sit in the newly installed tip-up seats were 1 shilling. The cheaper seats were priced at 6pence and 3p. This makes Theatr Colwyn the oldest operating cinema in the UK, with a film history that dates back 115 years. Reynolds stayed until 1922, when he sold the business to Coastal Cinemas, and the name of the cinema was changed to the Rialto. Sadly, the advent of the talkies in 1929 could not save the business under its new management, and the venue closed at the end of 1930. Then disaster struck when a fire tore through the roof of the Rialto, causing it to fall into the auditorium. It wasn't until 1936 that a new stage and roof were installed, and it reopened as the new Rialto Repertory Theatre under the leadership of actor-manager Stanley Ravenscroft. He leased the building initially for 9 weeks, but stayed for 22 years. He remains the most elusive piece of the puzzle in our historical research on the venue. We know very little about him, a most enigmatic character who lived with his black cat over the shop in the flat above the auditorium. He created a theatrical company that attracted an audience of highly respectable West End actors, such as Dame Sybil Thorndike. Many of the actors who worked at the Rep went on to great things. Pauline Jameson was spotted performing in Colwyn Bay and offered a role in a West End play. She was hailed as one of the leading classical actresses of her generation. She also went on to become a close personal friend of such luminaries as Dame Peggy Ashcroft, Vivian Leigh, and Laurence Olivier. During World War II, the population of Colwyn Bay received an unexpected boost when the entire workforce of the Ministry of Food moved into the town. Audiences at the Rep therefore grew larger and demand for shows was higher than ever. At that particular time, the stage manager's job was held by Jack Howarth, who would later go on to play Albert Tatlock in Coronation Street. In 1951, Ravenscroft left the theatre business due to ill health, but it wasn't until 1959 that the council bought the building and it became known as the Prince of Wales Theatre. It had a new repertory company led by another well-known London theatre manager, Geoffrey Hastings. Again, the Rep was a massive success. In just a few months, an incredible 33,000 people came to see the productions. During the next 4 decades, the Rep was to feature heavily in the programming at the theatre, with one of the seasons featuring performances from a then unknown actor by the name of Charles Dance. In the 1960s, the theatre began to stage summer seasons. The variety productions would often feature Welsh artists such as Stan Stennett and Ivor Emanuel. In 1991, as part of a modernisation programme, the name of the venue changed again, this time to Theatr Colwyn. And 5 years later, Conway County Borough Council took over responsibility for the venue. Since then, the cinema has been restored and films are now regular additions to the drama productions. Now we're going to go back to 1977, when Theatr Colwyn was known as the Prince of Wales Theatre. The summer show was Laughter Time, and the young actor and comedian who topped the bill was Gary Wilmot. And I'm pleased to say that Gary is my guest today. And welcome back to Colwyn Bay, Gary.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. And how are you? Okay?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, actually. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, life's good for me.
Well, let's begin with Laughter Time back in 77. What kind of memories do you have of that production, the cast, and also the response of the audience, which I know was really very good?
Well, yes. Well, it wasn't quite 1977. I was there I started in show business in 1977, but the first time I had my name above a show, which was Laughter Time, was at that lovely gorgeous little theatre, the Prince of Wales Theatre in Colwyn Bay. And it must have been about 81, I think. 1981. It was the year that Charles and Diana got married.
Oh, right.
I remember that day very well because we thought we'd go in early. The whole cast went in early and worked on a kind of a Land of Hope and Glory type medley with flags waving and everything else to celebrate their wedding. And of course, everyone was at home watching it. I think we had about 11 or 12 people in. That night. So, yeah. And in fact, the openings, the warm-up spot, I did a bit of a memory thing. I have a terrible memory, but by asking the audience their names and addresses, and I tried to memorise the names and addresses of an entire audience. I don't suppose anyone's ever done that before or since.
Right. And what about the cast of the show? Did you, of course, you changed the show for that specific event?
Yeah, we did for that event. But there was a lovely bunch of people. We had Trevor Bradford, who was a magician, who was absolutely delightful. Linda Hampton, a little dynamite of a singer. I often wonder what happened to Linda. She was quite a diminutive little figure, but like, she was very tiny, but she had a massive voice, an amazing voice. And a character, a mime artist called Spoke. Mervyn Brazil, his name was, but he was a mime artist, and he was very fun. I'd never worked with a mime artist before, and he was so lovely, so good. If I've missed anybody else out of that bill, I'm sure I must have done. There were dancers, and Ray Staniforth was the MD. I remember.
Oh yes,
all those years ago. Right. But yeah, I can't remember much more about it actually.
No. What about Colwyn Bay itself? Memories of the town?
Yeah, I have such a fond memories of that place. In fact, I was in Llandudno in the summer in The Wizard of Oz, and one of my days off I got on the bus and I went into Colwyn Bay and had a walk up and down the high street, bringing back memories. Couldn't get to the stage door now. Security is such that you can't get down the side of the theatre anymore.
No.
It was all open in those days, of course. But no, I remember Blodwin's, the cafe opposite. It was Maria who ran that with her husband, and I remember so much about it. I remember the Four Oaks restaurant. Went down and did the gig there, I think. Perhaps a Sunday concert. If they had cabaret there.
Yes, yeah. I was involved in that, in the cabaret at the Four Oaks. And,
were you? Yeah.
So, and we did a Sunday concert as well at the theatre, with the male voice choirs, and we called it Wales in Song. So, it was, and of course in those days it was really busy in the town, entertainment-wise.
It was odd having a summer season in the middle of a town like that. Summer season, usually, in coastal theatres. I know Colwyn Bay is kind of on the coast, isn't it? It's kind of spliced in half with the motorway now, which wasn't there back there. I think they just put the first posts in, I think, to mark out where the motorway was going to be, or the bypass, whatever you want to call it. But I also remember a brilliant guy called Vince Herbert, who was the stage manager. And Vince went on to become one of the top technicians. This was what's so strange. He became one of the top technicians in theatre, working. He ran the National Theatre, so he went on to do that. Yeah, there were a couple of guys there.
Yeah,
I'm struggling to remember. There was a young guy there. I did actually. Our paths crossed, and I'm struggling to remember his name. But his dad was on the council there as well.
Oh, right.
All those years ago, and his son he was probably only about 19, I think, at the time, and he went on to work in West End theatres too. So, you should be very proud there in Colwyn Bay about your theatre, sending talent out into the world.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. So, I mean, did you get involved in any local sporting activities, or?
Yeah, I actually, because I used to play a lot of rugby at school. Every single week we played other schools at rugby. When I left school in South London, there were no rugby clubs to join. So I kind of went down the football route with all of my mates. That's what we played. Then I came into the business and I didn't play for football at all because it was always a Saturday night. Saturday was the busiest day of the week, of course. There was always shows on a Saturday, so I couldn't play. And that was a big regret of mine. I later put that right when I was asked to play at Wembley in a charity match. And I thought, thought, well, Wembley, that'd be fantastic. And then I was spotted by a guy called Bill Graves, who was running a pro celebrity team. They were all ex-Arsenal players and celebrities, and he asked me to play for them, and so I played for them. But in the meantime, I got down training with the Colwyn Bay Rugby Club, and I really enjoyed that. I played half a dozen times for them as well. When I played at school, I was a hooker, and then but for them, I was a little bit more slight as I got older, and I played centre. And loved it, absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
fantastic. I think I must be down there on a list somewhere scoring some points too.
Yeah, you must.
I can vaguely remember that.
Yeah, I'll have to have a look in the rugby club next time I'm in there. Yeah. But I mean, from Colwyn Bay, you soon progressed into the 80s, into television, and things like New Faces, and also working with Keith Harris and Michael Aspel, and you did This Is Your Life as well.
Yeah, they did. It was my first ever pantomime, and it was at Catford Town Hall in Lewisham. It was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Eamon Andrews, I'm pleased to say, popped out of the basket, a costume basket there, and says, "This is your life," and, which was lovely. Yeah. It was the strange thing is though, I was quite young. I think Lulu was the youngest person ever to go. I think she was about 19 when she was because she was a big star in her mid-teens, and she was one of the youngest. But I was only about 30, I suppose I must have been. Yeah, and. I must have been about 29, 30. And it was after that I started to work with major television and theatre stars like Barry Manilow and Marvin Hamlish, Don Black, and these giants of our industry.
Yeah, fantastic.
And since then, of course, went on to sing with people like Elaine Page and Barbara Dixon and big orchestras. So it was, I think, would have been a much more interesting show had they waited just about 10 years. But I'm pleased it was Eamon that did it, because Eamon was it was part of my childhood.
Oh yes, absolutely. And there's a program here that's on a list of the things you've done called Q Gary. Was that a variety show or what?
No,
kind of
it wasn't. It was a kind of a sketch, kind of sitcom type of show, where we would enact these scenes and then walk through a thing we called the sketch door, and then do a sketch that clarified the conversation we'd just been having. It was it was Martin Beaumont and Nikki Boughton, and that was good. We did 2 series of that and a big old Christmas special as well. Great fun. I wish I could do them all again, to be honest. We could tidy up an awful lot.
Well, this is all part of your past and the experience that you gained from it, of course, then took you straight into the West End in 1989, and it was Me and My Girl, a great show that developed really into the late 20th century, because it was originally performed way back in the 30s, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was written for a comedian called Lupino Lane. And it was written especially for him. He was an acrobat and comedian, and whilst the production that they did at the Adelphi Theatre in the late 70s, late 80s, I beg your pardon, well, somewhere around about there anyway. Whilst it was a modern production of it, very slick, very modern, it still retained a lot of that variety, the variety element that was created for Lupino Lane, and my dear friend Rob Lindsay kicked it off with a pretty unknown partner called Emma Thompson. She was playing Sally Smith, so I don't know what happened to Emma Thompson, no idea. It was a massive success, and about 3 years later, they asked me if I would do it. And I said, yeah, absolutely. It was a great stepping stone. Yeah, I could sense that variety was kind of disappearing from our screens. Yeah, and so I was actually looking for other things. Yeah, and then that came along. It was the perfect stepping stone, as I say, to musical theatre, and I've been doing it ever since. Yeah, absolutely, and doing it very well as well. Because you're looking back at your record from '94, Copacabana, the UK tour of Oliver, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. The list of shows is fantastic. Yeah, it is. I mean, I've been very, very lucky I've been in the right place at the right time several times in my life, and it's been great. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it now, of course.
Yeah,
I'm about to go out on a show, although this has not been announced yet, but in a play, A Man for All Seasons.
Really?
I'm about to go on that with Martin Shaw, so that should be wonderful and something very different for me.
I mean, that's the thing, that you've been doing things, the width and the breadth of your work, from Shakespeare right through to panto, covering the Palladium pantos that stand alone, don't they? From Dick Whittington right the way through to the one you did last year was Jack? Was it
Jack and the Beanstalk? I think it was. Yeah. So I've been very, as I say, I've been very lucky. I just keep plodding along, and occasionally the telephone rings, and someone wants me to do something, and that's nice. It's a great feeling.
Yeah.
But I've been doing it for nearly 50 years now.
Yeah.
So it's something that it's part of me. It's my life, really, and it's all consuming.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to ease up a little bit now, but it's difficult when these attractive jobs come in. You kind of go, oh, I want to do that. Always wanted to do that. So.
But you're having a break from panto this year, are you?
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's extremely, as I'm sure people understand. I use football analogies a lot when I'm trying to explain our business, because they do have a lot in common. If you're very tired after a very hard football match, but it doesn't stop you going back for more. And pantomimes, they're like a very hard football match. You work very hard for about 7 weeks in your rehearsal period and on stage, and then at the end of it you're just absolutely exhausted. And as I've got older and older, it takes several weeks before you actually get over that.
Yeah,
and you're back on track again.
It's hard work, definitely.
Yeah, it's very rewarding, of course, but it is hard work. And
yeah. Well, it's absolutely great to talk to you, and good luck with the new production that you're working on. What was it again?
It's called A Man for All Seasons.
Yes,
very excited about that.
Well, every success with The Man for All Seasons, and thank you so much for coming in, and good luck in the future.
Thank you very much indeed. You take care.
Cheers. And there we are, Gary Wilmot. A few years after completing his season at Theatr Colwyn, he went on to star in the world premiere of Barry Manilow's West End musical, Barry Manilow Musical, that was inspired by his song Copacabana. Now, before we take our leave, we must mention an important event scheduled to take place very soon on the promenade in Colwyn Bay. It concerns a popular film director, author and comedian who was born in Colwyn Bay and loved the town. You'll remember his many performances as a member of Monty Python's Flying Circus, Mr. Terry Jones. As a former patron of Theatr Colwyn, Terry is due to be honoured with a statue on the Colwyn Bay promenade. Earlier this year, when they came to the bay to raise cash for the statue, we spoke to Terry's daughter Sally and his son Bill.
Lovely to be here.
Yeah, very lovely.
Lovely to be finally launching our campaign. A Python on the Prom. Have to get the name out there. It's been a couple of years coming, but it's really exciting to finally be able to tell everybody that we might be doing this. And we've been having such a good response from everybody in the town, and from the council, from the council to just people on the street. It's just been a really wonderful response.
And being in Colwyn Bay is always lovely. It's somewhere where Dad used to love coming to. We used to come and spend holidays in Wales all the time. Normally mid-Wales, but we used to come up here all the time when my grandfather used to live round down the road as well, and we'd come and visit, and he'd point out where he grew up and stuff, and he always loved coming back here, and I think it was the connection was always very strong.
Many happy memories, and he was such a great advocate for the theatre. He was a patron, wasn't he, of Theatr Colwyn, which is fantastic.
He was their first and only patron for some time. It was Joanne Ray at the theatre contacted him, and she said, well, why don't you become our patron? And he was their one and only patron for, I think, something like 18 years. They now got lots of more illustrious patrons as well, but Dad has always come up here excuse me, and done fundraising campaigns and just shown up for events and made sure that they.
But even if he was just passing, he would always stop by and bother her.
He would just appear.
Yeah,
that's what she tells us.
And there's this wonderful story about how he turned up one day and just to say hello, and she was like chatting away, and she had this office up in the roof of the theatre, and he was like, "Oh, can you see the sea from here?" And she was like, "I don't know, I've never seen it, but I think there's a Velux window, you can just see it out there." And Dad ended up standing on her desk to try and peer out of this Velux window to see the sea, and she almost had a heart attack. She was like, "Oh my God, I cannot be the person who killed Terry Jones."
I remember Joanne telling me that story about a year ago when we did a documentary on Colwyn Bay, a very happy story, and I know they were very, very close, weren't they?
Yeah.
And your dad left Colwyn Bay when he was 5. Is that
I think it was
right?
about 4.5. Yeah.
So what I mean, leaving a place at such a young age and then to come back and have such a passion for a place. Why do you think he loved Wales so much?
I think he has really he always had really strong memories of being here, even though he left so young, which is quite unusual. And he always had this pull back.
I think he was quite angry as a 4-year-old to be taken away. Yeah. He was just like, "Why are you taking me away from this wonderful place and ending up in a hellhole called what was it?
Isha.
Isha.
It was nice, he had a very good life.
It's English, that's wasn't it?
Yeah, and then I think he also was endlessly frustrated that he didn't sound Welsh.
He always had every single teach yourself Welsh on every single format you could buy. So he had it on record, he had it on audio cassette, had it on CD, but he never actually managed to learn too much Welsh himself.
Which is because he had such an ear for languages, and he really could pick up bits of languages, but Welsh is a tricky old one, and if you don't learn it when you're young, it can be really hard.
It's not easy. No. And I mean, I was brought up in Wales, and I worked in Carnarvon for near on 20 years, and I'm still a little bit, careful about, especially when it's written and you've got mutations and stuff like that. So don't worry.
I'm from Colwyn Bay, so you haven't got a cat and hell's chance of learning Welsh.
I always in the valleys. I always love sort of meeting two old people from two different valleys and getting them to argue about what a word is, because sometimes they're just in a massive fight about, even people who lived in valleys next to each other. They still fight. No, that's not what that word means. It means
that's right.
Were you when you were growing up, were you sort of party to the work of your dad? When he was maybe writing some of the songs that appeared in some of the productions.
I think in a way we were quite young when the Python TV series came out. I was born in '74, so actually I think the TV series had already been done. We were both around and on set in Life of Brian, so we went to Tunisia and saw a bit of the Life of Brian filming. But he later on, when we kind of got older, we remember he would always read the children's stories to us, and lots of his children's stories were actually him just making up stories for us, and then going, well, okay, and then writing that down, and that's how they came about. So they're the ones I really remember.
I have a clear memory, and I'm not sure if I've made this up, of him telling me the Where the Wild Things Are song from Labyrinth.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's called. It said it's been written by David Bowie. So I'm not sure whether I've made that memory up or whether David Bowie stole one of my dad's songs. So I don't know. No. But either way, if Dad wrote it and David Bowie sang it, that's still pretty cool anyway.
that is pretty cool. Do you remember some of the numbers that were co-written, I think, between Michael and your dad? Songs like classics that I remember from my childhood, like Spam and...
Yes, yeah. And there were many, many more. In fact, actually, at the minute, we've got his archive and we're just going through it and deciding where it should go. And we just keep turning up unused lyrics from songs. Very, very early version of On Bright Side of Life is coming up with some weird lyrics that definitely didn't make it into Eric's final song.
pleasure talking to you both. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the very best with the campaign. We're honoured to be having your statue here in Colwyn Bay.
Lovely, thank you. I mean, we can't wait to be unveiling it next year. We're really, really desperate to get this project going, so we're just going to be working on this really hard for the next few months and really try and get all the money we need from around the world. So if any of your listeners want to make a donation, go to GoFundMe/Terry Jones statue and make a donation. That would be awesome.
And there we are. It's time to thank everyone who took part in this second episode of Music in the Bay. My colleague Hugh Roberts interviewed Richard Coleman of the rock band Challice, Frank, who remembered the 1970s and 80s when the Bay reluctantly hosted the battles between the mods and the rockers, and Lee, who enjoyed the rare experience of welcoming the Radio 1 Roadshow to the Bay. We're also grateful to Gary Wilmot for his contribution to our production, and finally our gratitude to Terry Jones's daughter Sally and his son Bill for their cooperation. Now don't forget to check on the Bayside website for news of our third and final podcast on the subject of music in the Bay. We'll have interviews with Kenny Clayton from the underground artist movement, rising local star Hannah Popey, and Mark Richardson from the Llandudno Rock project. Thank you to our many contributors for making this recording possible, and to you for listening. Music in the Bay is a Bayside Radio production kindly supported by the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and the Cray Conway Town Team.